Before coming to Washington Correction Center for Women, I worked for many years at a nearby men's prison in a variety of different corrections jobs. When the men's prison closed, I was fortunate to transfer here because it meant I didn't have to move my family again. All I had to do was rethink almost everything I know, or thought I knew, about prison work. To help with that, I received a 2-day training to teach me that men and women are different. 2 days to teach me that men and women are different. Who knew? Okay, so now I knew that men and women are different. And how did I know that? One of those differences became very apparent my first week here when an offender came into my office and declared, "Mr. Hubert, my boobs are too big. I need another bra." I thought maybe it was some sort of initiation prank, because I had just come from a men's prison where this sort of thing almost never came up. Now, part of my preparation for TEDx was to review a lot of scientific data. I also interviewed many staff members in a variety of corrections jobs, all of whom have worked with both male and female offenders. Some common themes emerged. But I want to emphasize clearly here that none of this is in any way intended to suggest that either gender is better or worse than the other. These are simply differences based on observations and experience of numerous veteran staff over many years during countless interactions with male and female offenders. The main difference everyone mentioned is the amount of time spent listening and talking to them. Now, most encounters with male offenders are pretty straightforward. You tell them the expectations and the consequences, and they either comply or they don't. Mostly they do. But if they choose not to, they pretty much accept the consequences. Women, on the other hand, are much more likely to ask why about every element of a situation. Also, as far as most men are concerned, a simple yes or no is a perfectly acceptable answer to almost any question. Women seem to be more data-oriented and want to ask and share a lot more information. As I said, not good or bad, not better or worse, just different. Research shows that female offenders are far more likely than males to have been emotionally, physically, and sexually victimized and exploited. Now, knowing that most of this abuse is perpetrated on women by men, I need to be mindful of that in my interactions with them, from what I say to how I say it, body language, facial expressions, vocal volume and tone. Many studies agree that men and women have different pathways to crime. Male offenders typically have antisocial attitudes, which leads to antisocial behavior and sometimes incarceration. Women are more likely to become involved in the criminal justice system due to poor coping strategies, dealing with poverty and abuse, and often have a lot of chemical dependency issues. Mental health staff believe that you can't clinically address both male and female offenders with the same treatment options because they have different criminogenic needs and risk factors. Also, men's prisons don't have children living there. I was on the phone with a coworker here who I know from the men's prison when he suddenly stopped talking in mid-sentence. I asked him if he was okay, and he finally sputtered, "A 2-year-old just ran into my office." Child custody is an important issue for both male and female offenders, but is typically more sensitive for women because the loss of parental rights can have a significant impact on a mother's emotional and mental well-being. Medical staff report that health care for female offenders costs 2 to 3 times more than for males. Relationships are another huge difference in managing male and female offenders. Not the relationships offenders have with their friends and family in the community, but specifically those that develop between incarcerated women. Some of these are familial in nature, where women group together for support. But some are romantic and even sexual, but all involve emotions. Now, men form friendships and bond behind bars, but not with the intensity and drama demonstrated by women. For example, the normal trajectory is for offenders to promote from most to least restrictive settings, such as major prison to minimum security camp to a community-based work release to eventual freedom. I have never seen or even heard of a male offender deliberately sabotaging his security level just so he could stay with his prison pals. But it's common here. Female offenders routinely incur deliberate infractions to avoid promoting to a less restrictive setting just so they can remain close to their girlfriends. It's not an overstatement to say that most of the bad behavior and violence in our facility revolves around offender relationships, which is something we just don't see in men's prisons. Also, I never once at any men's prison heard, "I love you," being yelled across the yard or the day room. But it happens here all the time. Again, not good or bad, not better or worse, just very different. Offender relationships are also a key factor in the types and levels of violence. Now, most of the time when male offenders fight, it's about dominance or debt. But when women fight, it's almost always about relationships and partners and jealousy. So there's a much greater emotional component to this type of violence. On the other end of incarceration, it's almost always easier to find release housing for male offenders. Now, in Washington State, women only make up about 8 to 9% of the prison population. So it's easy to see why landlords who make a business of providing release housing options for offenders would find a larger customer base for men. And they market their properties accordingly to maintain maximum occupancy and profit. But this leaves fewer resources for women. But there also seems to be something else going on when it comes to release planning for female offenders. Many of us have noticed that while male offenders may sometimes burn bridges with family and friends, female offenders seem to nuke their bridges. And then they bulldoze them, and then they stomp down the dirt. I've heard male offenders' families say they'd had it with their person, but not with the seriousness and finality of when female offenders' families say it. Many of us have wondered about this. At some level, does our society trust women more because we view them as nurturers and caregivers? And do we take it harder when they offend because of that? Do we still foster somewhat of a girls are sugar and spice and everything nice ethos? Do we cut males more slack because boys will be boys and we kind of expect them to get into a little trouble? Does it hurt or scare us more when females offend because every woman is somebody's daughter or sister, girlfriend, wife, mother? In any large agency such as corrections, there's often a bureaucratic tendency to standardize policies and procedures to maximize consistency and minimize inefficiency. However, having worked in both male and female facilities, I appreciate our department's acknowledgement that blanket, one-size-fits-all approaches don't always work. A shift in thinking has brought us to recognize the importance of gender-specific risk factors, needs, and treatment. If we are due for a change, what would a new iteration of corrections look like? If we accept the scientific evidence Should we then consider a return to a previous paradigm, such as when this very prison was a treatment center? Now, our department and this facility are already well regarded as innovative, forward-thinking organizations. I hope to see us remain an industry leader by accelerating our movement toward an evidence-based, gender-responsive model. Thank you.